It is now 4:10 and we're reconvening for this workshop. I know you all are going to introduce the workshop. It's a workshop, not a decision meeting, but I know an issue of tremendous interest across the board, and looking forward to getting the chance to listen to you all. I hope you've been fully caffeinated and proteinized or carbized, whichever one you prefer, so that despite the late hour, we can engage on this very important issue. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Couch.
Good afternoon, Chair Marcus and members of the board. My name is Scott Couch. I am the section chief in charge of groundwater protection at the State Water Board. I wanted to give Leslie Graves top billing, though. She's the one, she and her staff have done most of the work on this project. She is the land disposal program manager. So we have a workshop today. We've got a lot of people who want to speak, and I hope that we will not take this full 45 minutes. In the interest of time, I'll try to speed things up. So we are not a panel per se. What we're going to do is we're going to present the item, the general order for composting operations, but we do have some panels. We have a local government, an industry panel, and a science panel who have some information that they would like to share with you. To my left is my attorney, Tim Regan. Leslie Graves is the program manager. We have Taya Tryon from the Central Coast Water Board here with us, who is instrumental in developing the order, and Frank Roddy, who was with the state board that was helping with the CEQA documentation, the EIR. So the presentation today, we're going to go over our regulatory authority and some of the outreach that we've done. It's been quite a long process that started way back in the early 2000s. We're going to do an overview of the order, and Leslie will do that, and then she will turn it back to me, and I'll talk about the major comments and some of our responses to those. But I want you to direct your attention to this photograph here. This is hopefully will clear up some things. What the general order is contemplating is regulation of the composting operation, the working surface, the place where you see these piles, these windrows here. And it's helpful to take a look at this because there's still been some confusion about, well, what does this order apply to? If you are a small operation, you might have your entire operation, your site trailer and all your equipment and everything out on this working surface on the pad. You can see some of these windrows out here. You have steaming piles of beneficial organic material. You have some that are not steaming. You have some that are being transferred from one place to the other, and that's an important concept and one that we're trying to, that's what the general order looks at. So we're looking at containing the wastewater that's on this working surface, on this operation within that area. That's mainly the whole point here. So what are the benefits of compost? Why would we want to regulate this? There are many benefits, and that's what a lot of the speakers are going to tell you about today, how this is a beneficial product. State of California disposes of a lot of waste, and a lot of the stuff that they dispose of is compostable. We don't have currently enough facilities to compost all of this material, so the idea is to be able to permit more of these materials. It is a valuable soil amendment. It increases the plant health. Two of the biggies here are the soil water holding capacity. With our drought, I've heard different numbers on percentages of what the possible water holding capacity would be. I've heard different numbers on carbon in soils. Dr. Jeff Creek will be here to speak about that. I think some of the other speakers will tell you about the percentages on this water holding capacity and how valuable it is to use compost as a product and how it adds beneficial microorganisms. I believe some of the science panels will also talk about that. There's an entire ecosystem that happens in that A horizon of the soil, and it's many, many millions of organisms that are in there, and compost does a great service to help add organic matter to that A horizon of the soil. Another big thing that's going on is the Healthy Soil Initiative that the governor's office is working with us on. CDFA is the lead for that. Jenny Lester Moffitt is here. She's going to speak after our presentation and tell you a little bit more about the Healthy Soils Initiative. One of the things it wants to establish short and long-term goals, look at resource optimization and permit streamlining. That's a big thing that this order will do. It will streamline the permitting of these facilities. If we want to get to some of the big goals of the Healthy Soils Initiative, we can't do it without streamlining the permitting and doing resource optimization. We want regional boards to be able to use a general order instead of having to come up with individual orders for these facilities. And the carbon farming I touched on, Dr. Creek will talk about that. He's with the Marin Carbon Project. And these aren't all the goals of the Healthy Soils Initiative. These are the ones that the Water Board is more directly related with. And one is to permit those 100 new composting operations by 2020 in anaerobic digestion facilities. This general order would do a great deal to help with that goal. So why would we want to regulate these composting operations? Because of the wastewater and the leachate. This is a high-strength waste. It contains nitrates and salts. We have a giant nitrate problem, salt problem in the Central Valley. Pamela Creedon is here, the executive officer at the Central Valley Water Board, and I think she would talk a little bit about that. There are pathogen concerns with manures and biosolids that are being used here, and concerns with contamination from metals. And you can see from this photograph what is coming from the edge of this compost facility is a wastewater, and you can see that it's a purplish brown type color with some scum on there. That's what we're trying to prevent, or that's the type of thing that we want to contain on site. So the authority, you're well aware, is through Water Code Section 13260, that if you're going to discharge a waste, then you need to do a reported waste discharge. It was surprising to me when we were talking to stakeholders. There's still confusion about, the question was, well, what do you mean by a discharge of waste? Well, what we mean are those piles in that picture right there. You're placing them on the working surface. That's a discharge of waste to land, and you see that there is a leachate coming from those piles. When the organic material breaks down, it generates a leachate. And for the purposes of this order, we've defined anything that is flowing across this working surface or from this working surface is a wastewater, and so that's what we want to contain. That was a source of confusion in the previous order, and we've tried to clear that up by just saying any liquid flowing across that working surface is a wastewater. Why the general order? We've talked about this before because it simplifies the process. It allows you to use, the water code allows that if you have similar waste and similar operations, you can use a general order rather than doing an individual waste discharge requirement, which takes a long time. It uses a lot of resources, and it will help support the diversion goal and the Healthy Soils Initiative goals. Another photograph for your review there. This is taken where we show wastewater that is coming from a facility. Now it's in the surface water. It has creates a high biochemical oxygen demand. The organisms in this stream are likely dying right here. You can see trash and other contaminants that are in that. This is what we're trying to prevent by the minimal requirements that we have in the general order.
Mr. Couch, the source of that water, just to illuminate, you're saying that's part of the content of the compost material. So there's a water content. There's also maybe reactions that generate water. Is there also dust control type sources of water, and then of course storm water?
So some of the other folks will likely tell you about the operation. What we're looking at is leachate that is generated from the compost piles when the organic material breaks down. The operators also apply water to the piles. They might apply potable water, but they might apply wastewater. They might be able to reuse some of the wastewater from their ponds. What we want to minimize is applying too much of that water so that you generate leachate coming from that pile, or you generate wastewater coming across that surface. So you either need to contain that, but it's better to try to minimize the generation of that leachate and wastewater. And we have a condition in the permit for that.
Yeah, and that last picture was a sunny day, so that wasn't from rainwater.
Possibly after a storm a long time ago. So this is, I wanted to show this. This isn't the complete timeline. What we're on is what I'm calling Generation 3 of this order. We did have a green waste only waiver. It expired in 2003. We started looking at a new waiver. It was determined that we would change that to a general order rather than a waiver, so we wouldn't have to renew that as much. In 2009, there were a lot of workshops that were held calling that Generation 2. We attempted to bring that to the board with a mitigated negative declaration. We had concerns about that, so in 2013, we pulled that order, started working on what I'm calling Generation 3 of the order, which is now. We worked with the Central Coast region, the Central Valley region, Taya, Clay Rogers, Brianna Bergen from the Lahontan region. We sat down with Cal Recycle, Brenda Smith, Kyle Pogue, and others, Howard Levinson, who will also speak here today. We looked at the requirements of the order, and we came to consensus on what we needed to change or what would be best. And we also, by the way, put together a full environmental impact report starting back then. So that was released in March of this year. I'm sorry, that's not right. We did a notice of preparation in July of 2013 and had a public scoping meeting. The EIR public comment period was from January to March of this year. And we had, toward the end of that, we had a public workshop. We also had 2 other workshops and met with individual stakeholders from California Association of Sanitation Agencies, the Cattlemen's Association, some of the speakers that are going to speak today, Matt Cotton, Neil Edgar, and some of the same people that are talking. We also sat down and talked with them about the comments that we've received. So that's where we got to where we are today, and Leslie will give you an overview of the order itself.
Good afternoon. I'm Leslie Graves. I'm the Land Disposal Program Manager here at the State Water Board. So briefly, I'll go over the exemptions, what activities are exempt, the 2-tiered approach, specifications, designs of those 2 tiers, and some siting requirements. The exemptions for the order include agricultural composting, which is materials that are generated from the actual site, the agricultural. It could be a farm, and it could be viticulture, but it's the leaves and stems that are generated there, and then they can be composted and reused on that facility. And they can only give away or sell up to 1,000 cubic yards per year. Chip and grinding facilities are excluded, including the operations that are co-located at composting facilities. These materials, actually the raw material will come into the chip and grind, they'll chip it and grind it, and then that will be used for composting. A fully enclosed vessel would be something like a building or a silo or maybe a tunnel, but they have to manage their wastewater in the fully enclosed vessel. Small operations, less than 500 cubic yards, can have either Tier 1 or Tier 2 materials. Scott will talk about this later, but during the economic consideration, we ended up determining that less than 5,000 cubic yards, it was a hardship, so we are excluding or exempting this, and with conditions. And this also doesn't mean that there might be other, these are just exemptions from this order. So there is approximately about 150 compost operations currently in California. About 25 of them have existing waste discharge requirements or are under a conditional waiver. So those would remain in effect until that would come up for renewal. Currently, most of the composting operations are not currently regulated for water quality. So those facilities, once the adoption happens, then they must submit an NOI, a notice of intent, within 1 year, and then they have up to 6 years to get into compliance. New composting operations would be working closely with the regional boards. They would also have to submit a notice of intent and a technical report. However, they would have to submit it 90 days prior to when they plan to do composting.
We're on the subject of existing. Have we taken any enforcement actions against composting facilities for runoff that was polluted?
I think that Region 5 will talk about any of that, but yeah. So, unless,
Region 3 has taken action on one composting facility also.
so as far as the order, it's a tiered approach. It's 2 tiers. It's based on volume and the types of feedstocks. And for the smaller facilities, it's less than 25,000 cubic yards because it's considered maybe a lower threat. It doesn't need all the protections, water quality protections. Tier 2 is a greater than 25,000, and they need additional protections. As far as water supply wells, they have to be 100 feet away from water supply wells or surface water. And then for Tier 1, they are required, there's depth to groundwater requirements for siting, which is based on percolation rate.
What's the nature of the feedstock differences?
I'm going to come up, that's my next slide. So before I get into the feedstocks, I want to clarify some definitions of feedstock, additives, and amendments. So the feedstocks are the materials that are actually being composted. The additives are during the compost process. It could be for adding moisture, it could be for carbon-nitrogen ratio, and so that's during the process where the amendments are added at the end. It could be for pH or soil bulking, something like that. So as far as the Tier 1 facilities, the agricultural, green waste, paper, and vegetated food materials are the lower threat materials, so they fall into Tier 1, and they don't have all the bells and whistles that the Tier 2 facilities will have, which I will bring up in the next few slides. I want to try to describe the anaerobic digestate derived. So essentially from the ag, green, paper, and vegetative materials, those materials can be anaerobically digested. And the material, the digestate that comes from those materials listed above can be used as 100% feedstock. So that digestate then can go into and be used as feedstock for composting. For Tier 2, they're the higher threat materials, and it can be food materials, biosolids, manure, and again, the same thing applies. Is if those materials are anaerobically digested, that digestate can be used as 100% of a feedstock.
For those watching from home, biosolids is the solid waste stream from sewage treatment plants.
Yes. As far as the additives, because they can be, some of them, for instance, like manure, can be a higher threat, they are limited in Tier 1 at 10%. Yes, it's up to 10%. And again, because and fertilizing materials. And so, for instance, manure that's anaerobically digested, that digestate can be used up to 10% in Tier 1. And then as far as Tier 2, because we have more of the bells and whistles, they can go up to 30%. And then other material is approved by the regional board. Just to let you know that this new version, we eliminated the percentage requirements for amendments. But for biosolids, amendments and additives, biosolids cannot be used as an additive or an amendment, and that's consistent with CalRecycle's definition. So currently, Tier 1 facilities do not require a pad requirement or a working surface.
As far as the hydraulic conductivity requirement.
As far as the hydraulic conductivity requirements, correct. So, and Tier 2 has higher threat material, so they are required to do a 1 times 10 to the minus 5 pad. And just as part of most of the sites, as you can see, there's the native material can probably easily be compacted and meet those 10 to the minus 5 requirements. And that's really important to, we don't want that higher strength material to percolate or, migrate down to groundwater. And also it's really important that it's sloped to prevent ponding. If they don't meet that, then there's these other options. Another option is in lieu of a pad, they can do groundwater protection monitoring, or actually install monitoring wells and do monitoring. Okay, why is it? The most important or the higher threat at these compost facilities is the pond. That's where all of the drainage will go into the pond, and that's where the wastewater is. And it can concentrate, and it has a head on it, so it's really important that these ponds are lined. It's important to understand the integrity of the liner. So we're requiring a pan lysimeter to be installed and if there is any water in the pan lysimeter, we know that the liner has been compromised. For both of these, for the ponds and the pan lysimeter, there is an equivalent engineering alternative that can be proposed. And as shown in the picture, tanks can be used as well.
Oh yeah, sorry to interrupt, but Leslie, these are standard provisions in other land disposal requirements. Is that right?
Yes, and these are not as strict as at a land disposal. Yes. So I just wanted to show some comparisons of the stage 2 and the stage 3 difference for comparison. We've dropped it from 3 tiers down to 2. We have more exemptions. The previous one didn't have exemptions. We've dropped it from a 10 to the minus 6 pad to a 10 to the minus 5 pad. And we've greatly reduced the number of parameters for monitoring requirements, and the compliance schedule has increased from 1 year to 6 years. And that's all I have, unless you have questions.
It's quite a drop in the monitoring parameters. What led to that change?
More of just evaluating to see if it was really necessary to do all of those monitoring. And the regional boards have the authority to increase as needed if they feel like they need some additional monitoring requirements. So we just went back and took another look and thought that these would at least be a start. And then they...
Indicator, right? If you have a problem, you'll know you'll have a problem.
Right.
That's
Regardless
exactly
of how many of them are there.
That's exactly what I was going to say. We were looking at more surrogate indicators like TDS and those types of things. And then if we were to detect those, we would go further and look at other constituents of concern.
Okay, before I forget, this is Scott Couch again. I wanted to thank Roger Mitchell, who's now at the San Diego Water Board, who was the prime author on Generation 1 of this order, and I want to thank Stephanie Young, who's now with Cal Recycle, who was the primary author on Generation 2. So, and we have other people to thank too, but I won't do that right now. So these are the major comments on the general order. We received 29 comment letters on the current version. Most of them were discussing the definitions being consistent. We did a lot of work on these and some of the costs of the order, and so I'll go into a little bit more detail in the next couple of slides here. Definitions, we tried as far as everywhere we could. We made the condition, the definition consistent with Cal Recycle. The one that we didn't was on agricultural material. We changed about 8 of the definitions we had in there to make them consistent, but the one we didn't was agricultural material, because the Cal Recycle definition includes manure in agricultural material, and we specifically have that as a Tier 1 feedstock in our order, agricultural material. So manure is a higher strength feedstock, so it is in Tier 2. So we couldn't do that one. Additives and amendments, Leslie talked about that some, and that was a major type of revision there. Once again, the additives are what you put into the process somewhere in the middle where it's actively composting. Amendments are the things you put in at the end, and say you have an order where you want a gypsum or sand or some soil blend that's added for a particular customer, and so we removed the percentage requirement on that, on the amendments. Chip and grind, agricultural definitions. This was interesting. About half the people said you should regulate chip and grind. The other half said you should not regulate chip and grind, but the rationale was generally the same, that if you're going to regulate it, you should for everyone, but if you're not, you shouldn't for everyone. So what we did was, if you were able to segregate your chip and grind operation from your composting operation, that working surface that we showed, we made a finding that that did not represent the same threat to water quality, so that leveled the playing field with the chip and grind operations. Small composting operations, Leslie talked about that already. The economic analysis said, well, if it's less than 5,000, you may experience hardship, so we gave a conditional exemption. This was a big consideration, the detention pond design. There was a lot of discussion about this, and with the work groups that we convened after, previously, this is what we had in Generation 2. We upped it to a 25-year annual return storm, which calculated out to be a much larger wastewater pond, and due to comments, we reduced that back to a 25-year, 24-hour peak storm event. So again, what we're trying to do is contain any wastewater on that working surface in a wastewater detention pond that can handle a 25-year, 24-hour storm event. We were asked to take out groundwater monitoring, or provide the option for groundwater monitoring in lieu of the detention pond. We did not agree with that. The Tier 2 facilities are required to have that wastewater pond. The working surface is designed to transmit that water horizontally to the pond. The pond is designed to hold that water, so there's always a constant head on that water, which increases the possibility of infiltration and contamination of the groundwater. Hydraulic conductivity requirements for the pad, we didn't revise those. Those had been previously lowered in an earlier version. Compliance schedule, that was moved in the previous version of the order. We had 1 year to come into compliance. We had comments on that, moved it up to 5 years, got more comments, moved it up to 6 years. We decided that was far enough, so we kept it there. Comments on the environmental impact report. Really, there were two or three main comments here: that the economic considerations analysis was not adequate, the cost of compliance was too high and would be damaging to the 75% reduction goal, and could potentially increase landfilling or direct land application. The economic considerations, we looked at a broad range of facilities. It was not meant to be a statistical analysis of all of the facilities. It was meant to be a cross sampling of different types of facilities. So we looked at 8 public and private facilities and public-private sponsorship or partnerships. They were all in the Tier 3 range, so they would be subject to the working surface requirements and the wastewater pond requirements. We estimated costs for the working surfaces and the wastewater ponds and for groundwater monitoring. The actual analysis was done for the least expensive option because you had the option to do groundwater monitoring rather than improving the working surface under Tier 2. So it was assumed that that would be the option that most people would take. We covered the hardship already for small operations. So here are some of the costs that we looked at, and we found that, and I want to say that these could vary widely. It depends on where you are. It depends on what type of materials you're going to use. It depends on how far you have to transport those materials. And so it's a very site-specific thing, and so I wouldn't look at these numbers exactly more. There's a large range depending on what you want to do. But for surface pad installation, $82,000 per acre is what we sort of came up with here. The pond installation, $147,000 per acre. Now, this is a much larger pond than what we're currently requiring with this 25-year, 24-hour event. The conveyance, there's other costs for conveyance drain and monitoring and maintenance there. And we also provided costs for estimates of costs for installation and monitoring of the wells here.
What would the pond installation be? You said this accounts for a larger pond.
I'm sorry, I probably didn't state that correctly. The 25-year annual return wastewater pond was calculated out to be much larger than the 25-year, 24-hour storm. So a pond that was required for, say, a 5,000 acre facility or a 25,000 acre facility might be 1/10 the size of what you would have to put in for a 25-year annual return pond. So an acre a pond would be very, very large for one of these facilities. So we calculated that to be, correct me if I'm wrong, Leslie, 500,000 cubic yard facility?
No.
Is that right?
This was for 25,000 cubic yard.
Okay.
So, and with a 25-year annual return, that was about an acre, and with the 25-year, 24-hour, maybe about 0.15. So these costs were based on the economic analysis that was done for the 25-year annual return. And the cost, so the reason it was per acre is because it was about an acre-sized pond.
Right. So 15, 20% of what your cost might be. Again, very rough numbers. Criticism that the general order would impede the waste reduction goals. Again, we're talking about streamlining the permitting. We're talking about using resources more efficiently, giving the regional boards a tool that they can use to reduce their backlog of these, and having their staff work on more higher priority sites. If there was no general order, the regions would have to deal with it on an individual basis. It would be more complex, and it would take much longer and be more costly.
Yeah, I felt like in some of the earlier discussions back when, people seemed to have the impression that the answer would be general order or nothing, and that would not be the alternative. The alternative would be individual orders.
Correct. And I think Taya's been waiting to answer that question, but different regional boards might do different things, but the operators would be required to submit a report of waste discharge, because it is a discharge of waste to land, and then the regional boards would determine what type of action that they would take, likely at individual WDRs. If
We have a level playing field issue too.
correct, and so you might have a different type of order with different requirements in the Bay Area than you might have in the Central Valley, and so the level playing field issue certainly is a part of that.
Right over the Altamont Pass, be two facilities with different requirements. But also another thing with the individual is it wouldn't benefit from this 5,000 cubic yard cutoff that you're proposing. I mean, necessarily.
Not necessarily. Each facility would need to submit their report of waste discharge with a technical report, and so and they would start the process. But one thing that's key also is that the regional boards currently have a backlog of WDRs, so it's not as if they could start in on these composting facilities. It's likely that they would have other priorities that are higher, and these would have to wait before they could even get in the queue to do an individual WDR.
And there's still, with the general order, there's still regional board engagement. It's through the NOI process, or are we handling that all at the state board?
These are, this is intended for the regional boards to use. So we don't envision that the state board would issue any of these permits. It would just be, they would submit report of waste discharge and enroll the operators under the NOI process.
I have one question on implementation. You went from 5 years to 6 years. Was there a big reason for that?
Based on the economic consideration, or actually going out to facilities, our engineer determined that when you really looked at it, they may need 6 years. So we changed it based on the economic consideration when they actually went out and did the analysis.
Another big consideration, I think that some of the other folks are going to talk about here, is that this would push compostable material to landfilling or to land application. What we found in our economic analysis, that landfilling was significantly still more costly than composting, and that land application was very, very significantly cheaper than either landfilling or composting. Land application is currently going on. While there is a possibility that there could be an increase in that, we do not think that it would be significant in any way. So we're not expecting that this would cause a significant increase in land application. And just,
I guess, will we be following that though? Because I expect to hear that that is going to be a big problem. How will we know if it is or isn't?
so we are working with Cal Recycle right now, looking at that issue, and we're working with Riverside County. They have a task force in Riverside County that we've participated in, and they're continuing to have meetings there. Riverside County is considering banning the import of green waste into their county. One of the big considerations is the transport of pests into the county. But that's one of the main areas. San Bernardino County, we have also issued subpoenas for the waste haulers and found that some of this was going on in San Bernardino County, so our Office of Enforcement has been engaged with this. The San Diego Regional Board has been engaged with this and has a couple of incidents that they were looking into. So it is on our radar. It's something that we're looking into and will continue to do that. Also, Howard Levinson from Cal Recycle is here, and they have some proposed regulations that would put more restrictions on the direct land application of green materials, and hopefully he could touch on that as well. But yes, I expect you will hear that in a few minutes. So I just wanted to put this up here, some of the other states, the number of other states that have similar type requirements. I won't go through all of these, but these are the main requirements that we have in the general order, and you can see, you know, it ranges from, say, 5 states have those same pond requirements up to over 20 for things like depth of groundwater are being outside of the floodplain and setbacks and things like that. So just a graphic illustration that there are other states that have similar requirements to this. And then we expected more regional board people. I think some of them may have left here, but I would like to turn it over to Taya from the Central Coast region first to just give a perspective. So.
Good afternoon. Again, my name's Taya Tryon. I'm a senior engineering geologist for the Central Coast Water Board, and I've been personally involved in helping State Water Board staff develop the requirements that are included in this order, and we've been patiently waiting for this order to get adopted so we can implement the requirements. I think the requirements are very reasonable, and it allows a lot of flexibility for site-specific needs. And we are always willing to work with dischargers to come up with creative solutions. But it is important that the wastewater is managed properly. I have seen firsthand the wastewater can degrade water quality, and something needs to be done. The other benefit, of course, is that you're not going to have 9 different regional orders that will apply to these similar types of facilities. And we at the regional boards, you know, there's a lot of time associated, a lot of resources associated with preparing and adopting an order. And a lot of that work has been done here and with collaboration from the regional boards. And so it would be extra work that really isn't necessary and not a benefit during these times of where we really need to protect water quality as efficiently as possible. So, I want to acknowledge that I think compost is a great thing. It really is, but so is protection of water quality. And so, as I said, I've seen firsthand some of the discharges that occur when wastewater is not managed properly. We have about 25 compost facilities in our region, and a small percentage of those are co-located with Class 3 landfills. And so we regularly inspect them, and some of the requirements are incorporated into the landfill WDRs, but the rest are not regulated or rarely inspected. We need to change that, and we have had plans to write our own order, but this order kept being imminent, and so we kept waiting. For example, in our land disposal program at the Central Coast Water Board, we have 2 engineers and a part-time geologist. We have over 60 sites, of which 13 are active landfills, and then the 25 compost facilities that we are aware of would be an additional workload on top of that. So obviously we can't work on all of them. So what we've done at the Central Coast is we've prioritized our sites based on threat to water quality. And some of these compost facilities rank up there. However, we have been waiting because we are busy, and we rather spend our resources implementing this order than actually spending the time to make one and go through the whole process again. So with that, I would like to, I hope that you will adopt this general order in the next board meeting so that we can move forward to properly managing this wastewater because it is one of the last unregulated facilities that should be regulated.
Quick question, Ms. Tryon. So when you look at those breakpoints that have been established for exemptions, do you think there's enough flexibility in the order that if you believe the threat to water quality is high enough that you can or you don't have to accept the exemption, like the 4,999 cubic yard?
Absolutely. We always have the option to do individual WDRs if it warrants it based on the threat to water quality.
I know I did notice Keith over there from Region 2. So I don't know if he wants to say anything. But there are other regional boards here too.
And I did want to point out one last thing, that we're looking forward to this order If we do have to adopt our own order, it's likely that it would probably be similar to this one, but probably with more stringent requirements. It could have more stringent requirements. So,
So, Chair Marcus, I know you're in charge of the schedule and not me, but we wanted to give, if there are, I know Ms. Creedon is here and Mr. Roberson is here, so we wanted to give them the option if they wanted to make a statement now, they could, or if they wanted to comment later, they could also do that, so.
And we did get letters from other regions.
Yes,
So
we
if-
received a letter from David Gibson, the executive officer at San Diego Water Board as well.
If I could just ask a question of all of you, because I've gone out on site at a couple of facilities and have talked with the regulated community. So if you could address the issue of additional requirements and, anything above and beyond the general order and that you might consider if you don't see that you would be adding additional requirements, then if you could just state that as well.
Pamela Creedon, I'm the Executive Officer of the Central Valley Water Board, and thank you for hearing this item today, or having this workshop today. I'm here actually because I did work with the other EOs in the, at least for regions 1 through 9, excluding Region 7, because Robert was not on the phone, but we did have a conference call on this item, and they all voiced strong support for this item. Region 9 in particular indicated they have their own general order, and that if this order should be adopted as it's proposed by staff currently, that they would anticipate eliminating their order and moving those facilities into this. So there's strong support from all the executive officers. I can't speak for Robert Perdue, he wasn't on the call. And Patty was here earlier from Lahontan, but she had to leave. So and Sam would have stayed if the item hadn't taken so long before on the MS4, so he had to leave. The other thing with Region 5, we started an effort to generate a general order for composting. Years ago, there was an outcry on the orders being proposed and developed. It was too stringent and too onerous. At that, then we worked with State Board and sent that work task over here for the State Board to work on the order and develop a general order statewide that we could use. So we have about a handful, about 4 to 6 facilities we regulate now under individual orders. They're mostly co-located with landfills now. I don't anticipate that may change. We may have a need to keep some under individual orders, depending on the size and the location and the complexity. But we have, according to the EIR, about 55 facilities. We expect there may be more than that we would use the general order, and I wouldn't anticipate us having to add requirements to it. I've worked with staff. Andrew Altavogt and Clay Rogers have both been involved in this order, and they're very comfortable with the requirements that we've set for these facilities. So I don't anticipate us. It's like saying hello. I don't anticipate us having to change the order. They're right. I mean, these are new requirements. It will cost money to implement, but we've had, of the handful we've had enforcement, 3 enforcement items on 2 of the facilities that we currently regulate. It is a waste stream that we do need to control and need to keep contained, and it could harm surface water, but groundwater is a bigger concern, especially dealing with the nitrates and the salt issues we have in the valley. So while we strongly support composting, I've always said that our wastes are really resources. I've said that repeatedly in public and to everyone who will listen to me. Whether it's solid waste or wastewater, it's a resource, but we still have to make sure that resource is protective of the environment. It can't come at a cost to water quality. And so I really would urge, and I think I speak for all of the other EOs, we urge the State Board to seriously consider the order before you as proposed, and to consider adopting it when it comes before you at the next board meeting or in July I don't know when it is coming before the board. July 7th. So, any questions? Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Keith Roberson. I'm the Land Disposal Program Manager for the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Board, and I'm here to express our regional board's support for this general order. Like the other regional boards have mentioned, as much as we support the diversion of organic materials out of landfills and toward beneficial uses, we do believe that composting operations pose potential threats to water quality. We believe they should be regulated, and we believe that the streamlined and consistent approach offered by the general order is a much better way to do it than the way we have been doing it. Currently, our water board oversees composting operations in really two different ways, depending on where they are. Almost all of our active landfills and several of our closed landfills have composting operations, and for those facilities, we regulate those operations under the site-specific WDRs for the landfill. So it's regulated under Title 27. But according to the CalRecycle's Swiss database, there's about 30 standalone facilities in our region that do composting that are not attached to landfills. And we don't regulate any of those under site-specific WDRs, and it would be a big burden for us to do so. To date, we have expected those facilities to enroll for coverage under the industrial stormwater permit, but as far as we can tell, only 4 out of the 30 or so have done that. So those facilities, to our knowledge, are essentially unregulated. So we believe that this general order is definitely the way to go. We strongly support it. Thank you.
So if we don't have other regional board folks, we have Jenny Lester-Moffitt with CDFA that hopefully would say a few words about the Healthy Soils Initiative and how we've been working with them on that activity.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Scott, thanks for inviting me to this meeting. Just wanted to talk briefly about the Healthy Soils Initiative. As you might recall, back in January, seems a long time ago now, but it was just a little bit ago, Governor Brown in his January budget made mention of a new initiative called the Healthy Soils Initiative. It's something that's very important to him, something important to the administration, really just laying the groundwork for talking about soil management and ways in which soil management can sequester carbon, among other benefits. Some of the other benefits Scott already mentioned is increasing water holding capacity in the soil, especially during drought years, and ensuring long-term sustainability of food production and biodiversity. And then finally also reducing dust and wind erosion. So under the authority that California Department of Food and Agriculture has, we have an Environmental Farming Act, and so we were given the authority to work on that along with the governor's office and convene relevant agencies, departments throughout the state to start looking at ways in which we can all work together to foster healthy soils. Certainly the Water Board has been part of that. I think that we've benefited from having various board members. I think Dee Dee came to the first one and Tom Howard came, and now we have Scott and Jonathan participating as well. So I want to thank you guys for your participation in this. Some actions that we identified in our process amongst the administration was to first and foremost protect and restore soil organic matter, otherwise sometimes called as soil carbon, in soils to ensure climate change mitigation and food and economic security. Identify sustainable and integrated financing opportunities, including market development to facilitate increased soil organic matter. Provide for research, education, and technical support to facilitate healthy soils, increase governmental efficiencies to enhance soil health on public and private lands, and ensure interagency coordination and collaboration. So we developed some key short-term actions. We wanted to look at whether or not we can create a goal for soil organic matter. Our hope is to convene a stakeholder group to look at that, whether we can develop a soil organic matter goal that we'd like to get to, along with scientific input as well. First and foremost, I think we also need to look at the research needs and look at the critical gaps that we have in research. And then also identify demonstration projects. And then once we have that set up, really look at integrating incentives and for management practices that could be, but not including reduced tillage, cover crop, compost, and many more other management practices, but certainly compost is part of one of those management practices that we talk about. So for compost, some of the actions that we've identified specifically would be to look at a tier tipping fee or some other complementary mechanism that would incentivize diversion of organics, to facilitate the discussion of the benefits of compost when managing nitrogen. And then, of course, Scott also mentioned the streamlined permitting. So those are just a handful of some of the actions. We have been reaching out to stakeholders. We've had one public meeting on May 14th, and we'll have another public meeting July 17th that we'll be co-hosting with Cal Recycle, and I think it'll be here at Cal EPA. I don't know about this room specifically. So I invite everyone in the audience to come to that. The focus on that will be on compost. So I think that's a very relevant conversation to be had. And just wanted to talk about the fact that this is very much an administration-wide effort. It's something that we plan to engage all stakeholders, other agencies, federal, UC as well. I think this is something that Healthy Soils is something that is not only a huge initiative that California is undertaking, but the UN has also, as well as the USDA. So this is an important thing for us here in California and worldwide, and we want to thank you guys for your involvement and look forward to continued participation.
Oh, you mentioned a lot, and you may have meant to mention it, but it's come up a lot in our drought resiliency discussions about the U.S. Forest Service and what they can do for healthy soils. Are they involved?
Yeah, so the Resources Agency is involved. We haven't really been working with the U.S. Forest Service, but we've been working with Resources, who includes CAL FIRE and Department of Forestry here in California. So we've been engaged with them and really trying to explore the extent of how much into public lands we are able to really make an impact within the Healthy Soils Initiative. So yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
I would just add, and you know this as well as any of us do, the one reason for considering this today in this workshop and getting input from folks, but then taking some action on this fairly promptly, is so we don't kill the goose. I mean, Healthy Soils really is the goose, but if the golden goose. Yes, absolutely. It's a wonderful goose. I love the goose. But if there's if there's damage to groundwater, and we're going to know more and more and more and more and more about groundwater as the years go by under the new law, we don't want to have to restrain what we're doing on healthy soil. So I see these as absolutely ironclad partners to make sure that we can have a Healthy Soils initiative that is lasting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Let me just add my thanks for the whole initiative. I think it's about time and great, because obviously making this all work with all its complexity reduces it just changes the kind of inputs that people are. People tend to have forgotten the healthy soil part of the equation that it takes to grow things. In some places, other places, they've never forgotten it. So this just is a much smarter way to go in terms of agricultural health in general, and it's just smart. So thank you for taking it on.
Yeah, it's something that we're very excited about at CDFA, and I personally am very excited about it as well. So yeah, I concur. Thank you.